Welcome to Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton, where we equip pastors to take their churches from declining to thriving by pointing them to a new future and a new hope. Join us weekly for encouragement and practical advice in your pastoring journey.
Hey, welcome to Revitalize and Replant. This is Friday, so it's our very special Friday interview segments where we have interviewed some of the most famous people on the planet. But today we're going to interview Sam Rainer. So, no, Sam, we're grateful to have you.
Not one of the most famous people on the planet.
Oh, man. Sam, thanks for spending the time with us. Man, you live in the world that we all live in. I should send you a nice royalty check because I think there's not a day go by that I don't quote you somewhere saying your church's address is no accident. I must say that. I say that to my wife at dinner. I say, Jill, do you know our church's address is no accident? No, I use that in every conference, every consultation, and I give you credit for it. It's a great line.
Well, all of that can be done at give.westby.org.
All right, we'll work on it. Hey, you are at Bradenton, so tell our folks who are listening all about your church. I love the story. If you have not heard this story, pull over to the side of the road, turn up your device, and listen carefully because this is a great story.
Well, West Bradenton was a church that was in definite need of revitalization when I arrived. Now, here's the thing about our case. We were a little larger neighborhood church, so we were not in any sort of danger financially. We were not in any sort of danger with our attendance. It was down, but it wasn't in a place where people were panicking or anything like that. We had a boatload of deferred maintenance, and we had a church that was very introverted in its culture, not mean people, not in fact, they're very nice, but very much inward in its focus, not because they disagreed with the Great Commission or the Acts 1:8 imperative, just they weren't doing it. So they brought me in. In fact, that was what the search committee said. They said, we have to hire an extrovert because everybody in this church is an introvert. And I said, well, I'm going to annoy everyone. I'm going to be like the most annoying pastor ever to you. But we just started working slowly on any number of things. We had become the repository of a lot of other churches. So our attendance was, we had about 400 or 500 people here, but half of them were just upset people from other churches. They'd split from another church.
Stop you there for just a second. What year did you go there?
It was 2015, so about 9 years ago.
You've been there 9 years. How many people did the sanctuary seat if it was full?
Well, if we really cram people in, we can get 600, but that's super tight.
Okay. So
we don't have a giant space.
Yeah, that gives me a picture of what we're talking about then. All right, go ahead.
Now, so when I got here, it was, they said, well, we have three services. They had three services. We have an 8 o'clock traditional service. We have a 9:30 contemporary service. And then we have an 11 o'clock blended service.
So wait, you had 400 people at three services?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So the 8 o'clock service, what I get there and they said traditional, but what they meant was Gaithers. So okay. I was like, okay, that's not how I define traditional, but fair enough. That's not a bad thing. I go to the 9:30 service. You say contemporary. This is like coffee shop acoustic. This isn't really contemporary. And then I go to the 11 o'clock and I'm like, wait a minute. This is the exact same service as the 8 o'clock service, just with a choir now. So even their labels were a little off. And now understand, the people were awesome. We did have a segment of people that were really not part of our church. They came from the Nazarene church. They came from another local Baptist church. And then once they kind of, figured out where I was going and it wasn't going to be where they wanted to go, they all left. So it was really 250 to 300 people that were kind of core people at West Bradenton. And I don't fault people for moving on, of course. I mean, that they didn't really need to be here in the first place. So you're talking about a church that is confused in who it is in terms of Worship was a mess. We had some staff that needed to go. We had some staff that were involved in some moral failures at the time that I didn't know when I got here and inherited them. So we had to fire a bunch of staff, which was unpleasant. And it's always hurtful to the church. And, they always want to know what happened, and it's tough to share, because these are, sin matters that you can't hide, but at the same time, you don't want to air everyone's dirty laundry for everyone to see. So we had some staff issues, and then we had really the biggest issue of all, which was millions and millions and millions of dollars of deferred maintenance.
Okay.
Because we have 4.5 acres, but 62,000 square feet. So we have almost no parking here, which is why we have the 3 services. It's not the worship space. We're in the city, and we just don't have the parking.
So what has worked best in that neighbor? And that's a neighborhood church. There's no two ways about it. So what has worked best in helping that church find stability and growth over the last 9 years?
Well, I didn't bring stability at first. I brought a lot of instability, which some will tell you it was unnecessary instability. I will defend myself a little bit and say the changes were necessary. What brought stability, though, over time, and it really wasn't until after COVID because we just ripped the Band-Aid off at COVID.
Okay.
We were making incremental changes. Because I'm looking at the budget, I'm looking at the cash flow, I'm looking at our people. It's an older white church.
Right.
When I got there, it's an older white church in an area that's 45% ethnic minority. So we had to make the shift from older white church to young families and ethnically diverse. And we're about 25% ethnic now at West Bradenton. We're not to the 45% where I'd like for us to be, which is our community, but we've certainly made a lot of significant progress. And most of that is now with young families. We're about 20 to 30 years younger on average. 30% of our church now is 18 and under. Okay. So, we've made really good progress there. What we did was, so we're in a community in Florida that does have a significant amount of older people. Don't want to neglect them at all. Of course, you have to continue to minister to them. That's your community too. But we went all in with, let's do ministry to the people right around the church. Like, who are they and how do we minister to them? And so we gave up on the idea of being a regional church, which we really weren't anyway. I mean, we're buried in a neighborhood. So we kind of embraced our location. We embraced what was obvious, but unfortunately, a lot of churches just don't see the obvious. They compare themselves to the big, large church out east or the big, large church to the north. And it's like, that's not who we are. That's not who we need to be. We can't be that. If 1,000 cars showed up on Sunday morning, we have 310 parking spaces. So we can't be that church. We don't physically have the campus to do it. So we embraced who we are. And that was really the key, is just helping people understand the obvious. I had people asking me, are you going to relocate out east? Are you going to relocate the church? I'm like, why would I do that? Mm-hmm. I know we've got a lot of deferred maintenance, but why would I take the church 45 minutes away? It'd be a whole different church. We have to, God, as you have said that you quote me on occasion, our address is not an accident. We are here for a reason. And it's really expensive to build a church campus when you're right up against the coast. I mean, we are on the coast. So we're here. It's paid for. We don't have any debt. We might as well embrace who we are.
So how old is your building?
19. Which era? Because we've built over the years. So I like to make the joke. We still haven't finished our renovations, even though we've pumped millions into the facility. When new people come, I say, just let me know what decade of bathroom you prefer, because we've got 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and current. So whatever era of bathroom if you want pink tile, we have that. We still have that. So if you like the 60s kind of aesthetic, we got you taken care of. But most of the building was built from 1962 to about 1975. There's 5 different buildings.
All right. So that's, yeah, you're right. That's 50, 60 years old and everything needs to be updated. Hey, okay. So let's
Nothing
switch
had
gears a
been
minute.
touched, Mark.
Huh?
Nothing had been touched. They had the same chairs with the old springs that would poke you in the butt
Yeah.
from the 19s. I mean, that's how bad it was. There was literally nothing that had been touched.
Well, I've been to that church many times. You have too. They're all across North America. Your dad, he taught me when you walk into a church to do a consult, the first thing you do is you ask yourself, what year is it? And, you can pretty much tell by looking at the light fixtures and the color scope, color scheme and everything else, what's been changed, what year is it? Hey, real quick, let's switch now to campuses, adopting other churches. Your church is a relatively normal sized church, like you said. But you've had some desire to do that. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been in that recently?
Well, that was part of being a neighborhood church. So when we cast the vision to be a neighborhood church for the nations, and that's kind of our tagline, that's our mission, that's our vision. When people, what's your church about? Well, we're a neighborhood church for the nations. So we want to reach all the people that are right around the church, and then we want to send people out. So when we say nations, we're not just talking about international missions. It's this concept of like sending people out. They're always living sent. And people started saying, well, I know a church right down the road. They need help. And, we're at this point, we're growing. It's right before COVID. We were averaging just over 700 people at this point. So we'd seen a lot of good growth. COVID crushed us again, like a lot of other churches. But right before that, people are like, well, we're kind of we max out our facility from what I can estimate right around 900, 1,000 with our 3 services. So we get to 900, 1,000 people, and it's like we literally have no more parking spaces for people. So we just started with this idea of like, let's just foster another church. Let's send 20 of our people to another church that's willing to receive the help and get them back to where they need to be. So we had a church down the road that was desperate for help. We sent a worship team and children's ministry and all that down there for the community year to go down there. And right around when the pandemic was hitting, actually as the pandemic was hitting, they're like, we know if you guys leave us, we know we're not going to make it on our own. So let's just become part of your church. And I thought, this is a really good time to do an adoption, is right in the middle of a pandemic when I don't know if my own people are going to come back. But that's what happened. It was God's timing, not my strategy, but God's timing. And so we embraced this idea of not only fostering other churches, which we've done 3 or 4 fostering arrangements since I've been here, but also planting. So we've planted a church to the south of us. We've planted several churches in our history, and then adopting. So we kind of have an all of the above strategy when it comes to just being about the neighborhood. And Southside, which is now our Southside campus, came to us and said, hey, let's just become part of your church. And it's been a wonderful story. We've started a Spanish speaking ministry, and they've utilized our campus there. And it's been a good story. The growth has not happened the way I would like it. I wish I could say, yeah, they're averaging 300 in attendance right now. I mean, they're up like, let's see, 300%. But when you start at 12, those percentages work a little better for you. So,
well, I want to make it clear to our people who are listening, and because nobody else that's not listening, they're not going to hear this anyway. But I want to make it clear to people who are listening that we talk about campuses. Again, it's kind of like church plants. You're about a church plant. A guy started with 2 people, and now he's got 800,000. Those are outliers. And even campuses, many guys think, our campus is only 75, 100 people. Well, it was 10 when you got there. And now it's functioning. It's reaching people. It's making disciples. I mean, it's a church that was going to die, and now that's fine. I mean, we have to redefine success, I think, in these campuses. And sometimes, you understand this, certainly, sometimes it's a large mega church that has a campus, and they're like, well, it's only got 200, or it's only got 150. It's like, dude, that's 78% of every Southern Baptist church, right? I mean, if you're going to start campuses and you think they're all going to get to 500, well, it's probably not going to happen, but it doesn't mean it's a failure. Okay, really want you to talk about fostering. I'm telling you what, Sam, I get more questions about fostering than I do anything else right now. And our team is working on some materials to try to help churches navigate that. What does fostering look like in your context?
So fostering for us, the whole concept came out of us being a neighborhood church. So us being a neighborhood church, we asked the question, what's the number one need in the community? That's just I just sat down with my leadership and I said, let's solve the worst problems in our community. So the two worst problems for us were heroin addiction and foster children. These kids did not have homes. So the whole thing started with us being like, okay, well, let's minister to heroin addicts and let's give these kids homes. From that came the idea. So we started fostering children, and now we have a dozen foster families in our church, and I don't even know how many foster kids. We can have 20 or 30 at times. It's not always that
Right.
many. We have 20 or 30 in our children's ministry. So I love churches that say we don't know how to get kids. So we'll start fostering. You will have children in your church.
That is so true.
And that's how we got younger. That is how we got younger, is we just started fostering children. Well, it was not a leap for us as a foster family church to say, well, let's foster churches. If we can help these children get back to their families, which is the whole goal of fostering,
Sure.
then we can help churches get back to where they need to be. And so, honestly, it's not like I sat down and I had this great vision and this great strategy and all this lingo. It was like we were dealing with like heroin addicts pooping on our front steps because we're doing ministry to them, and they come back because they feel safe there and they just go to the bathroom outside. And these kids that are come out of the womb addicted to cocaine because mom was using. All of this ideas just came from us just being in the grittiness of ministry. So once you start doing stuff like that, it's like, well, yeah, we can go help another church. This is not glamorous ministry. It absolutely makes me chuckle when you hear people talk about like multi-site systems as if this is a glamorous thing. And it's like, no, not at all. We went down to the church that had like 12 people in it. And, we had to tear down the sanctuary. We had to literally demo it because it was full of mold. So
Right.
it's
Right.
and now they meet in what is the fellowship hall, which actually we renovated. It looks great. But this is not glamorous ministry at all. So yeah, fostering for us just came out of an idea of, well, if we can help kids, we can help churches.
I remember the first time your dad brought it up to me when we were doing a podcast, and he talked about changing the sort of the narrative, the nomenclature from a vocabulary to not merging, but adopting. And it was like a light went on in my head, and I thought, yes, it's not merging. We don't, someone said, if you're going to get a heart transplant, you don't go find a 96-year-old with heart disease and say, hey, I'd like to have his heart. I mean, there's no reason to merge an unhealthy culture with a healthy culture. What purpose is that? So your dad was so correct in helping me understand what happens in those situations is an adoption. The church becomes part of the adopting family. But then he also, right after that, again, I think it was you and what you were doing at Bradenton was that fostering. Well, if we adopt, and some churches don't need to be adopted, just like some children don't need to be adopted, they just need to be fostered. And so what does fostering look like? And so now on our team, working with hundreds of churches every year, those are the terminologies we use, and it is a great picture of what that looks like. Now, when you said your church fostered, you went in and took care of the building, you send some folks. It's probably unique to every situation, right? Whatever it is you need to do, you do, but it's sort of a limited time that can be renegotiated later on. Is that right?
Yeah, we tend to do a year.
Okay.
And I don't, long-term foster. So it's like fostering a child. Like the goals change. Like the first goal is, let's help this kid get back home with mom and dad,
Right.
or whoever the guardian is who the child got removed from. Let's get them back healthy again so they can have their kid. I don't want somebody else's kid. I want the parent to have their child back. So when you start with a church, that's where it starts is, well, what are the critical needs? It could be children's ministry, it could be worship. A lot of them don't even have pastors. Like, so when we started fostering Southside, they're like, we don't even have anybody to preach. Like, can you send us somebody to preach? And it's like, sure, I've got guys that I've trained up and they're ready to go. So let's get them down there. So it starts with the basics. Like, hey, we're not even going to be able to have services, because we just don't have anybody to do this. So let's get you having worship services. And so it's real back to the basic sort of stuff. Now, it turned into an adoption situation because they were to the point to where they knew that they weren't going to be able to do it on their own. It's like, okay,
Right.
but that conversation initiated with them. We said we'd commit to a year. We'll do a year. Um, Beyond that, you kind of build a weird sort of dependency. Like you don't want a child to be stuck in the foster system for years on end. That's not healthy for anybody. Either the child returns to the parent or ends up being adopted in a home with another family. Not ideal. Every adoption begins with a tragedy, right? Every child that's adopted, it all begins with a tragedy. So every church that needs fostering or adoption, it begins with something in a very negative situation. So it just becomes a moment of like, a spiritual and strategic triage. Like, okay, what we're not going to be able to solve every problem. What are the worst things that are going on here, and how do we step in and help you out?
Awesome. Well, that's been really helpful. And again, I appreciate your insight on that. There's so many churches that need to be fostered right now. Hey, Church Answers, man. It's great. If you don't know about it, just go to Church Answers, and that's where you'll get church answers. There, I just thought that up.
Yeah, got church questions. We have church answers.
There you go.
So,
all right. Well, give us some of the best resources coming out right now. What do you got coming? Just some fresh stuff right out of the oven.
well, one that's coming out that will be released in October is Safe Church Training. So we are going to be the first to release a comprehensive guide for church safety. And I've got a new book coming out called Make My Church Safe, published by Tyndale. Really excited about
What's
that.
that? Look, what's the width of church safety? You mean like good locks on your doors, or what?
So there's a lot of good things out there around abuse and recognizing signs of abuse and things like that. Sometimes when people say church safety, you think really two things: child abuse or active shooter. And we do discuss those things and we talk about them. But this is more like, hey, I've got volunteers that are first impression volunteers. I've got children's ministry volunteers. I've got a group that's leading a mission trip. I've got another group that's doing VBS, and I've got another group that's doing student camp. Well, this is a comprehensive training that can kind of take care of all of those things, where we get back to the basics. It's video driven. You can send a link to your people. Hey, you're doing VBS. All right, well, here's the VBS training guide. You're doing camps. Well, here's the camp training guide. No, by the way, every volunteer needs to take these 7 core courses on just, the basics of church safety. So it's more general for all volunteers, and it has modules that are specific to certain occurrences. So we're excited to release that. If people are listening to this before October, I would point them to knowyourcommunity.com, which is our demographic report, which is one of our more popular resources.
Yeah, I've used that even recently.
It shows you what your neighborhood's like.
Yep, it's good stuff. And know your neighborhood, know your pastor, and know your community, know your church. Yeah, those are all really good tools that you have. So, man, Sam, thank you for everything you've done and continue to do for the church. Appreciate it very much, your wisdom, your insight, and I really appreciate just staying there at West Bradenton for 10 years and working through all of that. And real quick, I know we're over time, but you said COVID hit you hard. What was that like, real quick?
Well, we shut the campus down because we didn't know what was going on, just like everybody else did, and then quickly reopened. And we reopened with less than half our people.
Really?
And yeah. And we stuck with 3 services at our main campus. We stuck with our Southside campus. And we just said, all right, the people here are our core. They're the ones that believe in what's going on. Let's rip this Band-Aid off. And we went into, this is when we started growing more ethnically. We just said, we're going to be the church for the neighborhood. And, we're going to do a lot of things in Spanish. We're going to do things that really attract younger people and younger families. And, we probably made too many changes all at once, but that was the time to do it because it was an opportunity, and it really paid off now. But it was hard. There were weeks when we were a third of the budget requirement in giving. Thankfully, we've caught up and we're at record numbers now. But it was a very difficult season for our church because we were right in the middle of needing to do a bunch of deferred maintenance catch up too. So not only are we not hitting budget, but we kind of need millions from people to get our campus up to speed. And like a lot of churches and like a lot of stories, we just had to really dig our way out of it. And thankfully, our people have done an incredible job of getting us back to where we need to be. And we're in a very healthy place now.
Good. Well, that's a good positive thing to end on. By the way, we do end these Fridays with Final Four. So we may send you a gift if you answer these questions correctly. What was the very first concert you remember going to? Music concert. Who was it? You remember? Or
Very
one that
first,
just stands out in your mind when you were young?
Okay, so teenager would have been Aerosmith.
Aerosmith. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the very first one I remember as a kid that my dad would have done at the church was Charles Billingsley.
Well, that
are very different.
Something about how old Charles Billingsley is.
Well, okay, so one of those I was forced to go to, and the other one is more my jam.
I know, but being forced to go to Aerosmith is not. I get that. So
that was not the one I was forced to go to.
What was the very first? It's Steven Tyler, right? That's Aerosmith. He just canceled his tour, right? He lost his voice. Did you notice that?
Well, he's almost 80 years old.
Well, I know, but he was going to be singing here in Kansas City, and they kept putting it off. And finally, he's like, "Yeah, I can't." He's almost 80. I know. That's amazing. Okay, what was the first car you ever owned?
A 1995 two-door Jeep Cherokee XJ Sport.
Really? That's nice.
Yeah, I wish I still had that thing.
I bet you do. All right, if you're on a desert island and you got to listen to one or the other, the only thing you could pick up on your music channel was one or the other, would you listen to bluegrass or Southern gospel?
Oh, bluegrass all day long.
Oh, good. Thank you. You answered that absolutely correctly. Do you prefer the SEC or the ACC?
The MLB.
All right, you win. All right, man. Well, we're going to send you a fine collection of some of Tom Rainer's greatest books, so we'll get those right out to you, and we'll get you a hat, International Harvester hat, because we got those.
I don't have one of those.
You don't have one?
I don't have one of those.
We will send you the IH hat, and it even has the NAM logo on it, and IH lets us do that. So, because everybody was buying John Deere hats, nobody was buying IH hats, so they let us do that. And then also, as our team goes out and travels, we bring home a nice collection of hotel soaps and hand washes from the bathrooms, and we'll send those your way too. We have a nice gift basket of hotel soaps. So those are all coming your way, Sam. You got that going for you, which is nice. So
I'm honored. I will wear the hat proudly.
All right. Thank you, buddy. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today on Revitalize and Replant. This podcast is brought to you by the North American Mission Board, where we help dying or struggling churches regain health for the glory of God and the good of their communities. If you found this conversation helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. To learn more about becoming a replanting pastor or to explore resources about revitalization for your own church, visit churchreplanters.com.